Good evening. This week's parsha is Parshas Vayetzei, and as I always say, every parsha is full of tremendous chazal and medrashim, and this one certainly is way there at the top. The parsha begins, Vayetzei Yaakov Be'er-sheva, Vayelech Harana. And Yaakov left and he went to the yeshiva of Shem Va'aver, but on the way, he went to sleep and he saw Malachi Elokim Olim V'yordim Bo. We know that in Olam Hazeh, a person can go up or go down. In Olam Haba, it's an olam of omed. He can't do mitzvahs. He can't do mitzvahs. And if you can't do mitzvahs, you're an omed. You're not getting better and you're not getting worse. But in this world, it can be, and as the Medrash says, the olam is talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Yordim is Korach. So says the Medrash, because it referred to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu that he could keep all the chips that were chiseled out, that came out from the luchos. Most say that the luchos were made out of sapphire. Some say diamond. But whether it's sapphire or diamond, if there were chips, and you can imagine the value of the luchos. I mean, take a piece of sapphire that's so big, it's trillions of dollars. But the concept of that medrash is really reflecting the concept of money. Because the medrash says that Korach was one of the richest people ever to live and will ever live. That means he was so fabulously wealthy, but Moshe Rabbeinu also became very wealthy because of all of these chips that Hashem said, Psal Lecha, you could keep all of the chips. And the point that the Medrash wants to stress is that a person through money can soar heavenward. It means a person takes $1 and he gives it to an ani, that this ani then in turn smiles. And he takes the $1 and buys a coffee and makes a bracha and a bracha achrona, and he didn't have a drink for 4 hours and he was a little bit parched. The nachas ruach that causes in Shamayim is unbelievable. As I always say to you, by tzedakah it says that it's tatzil mimaves, it saves a person from petira, from death, and it is mevi geula. So the Medrash says that although Moshe Rabbeinu was very rich, but what he did with the money that he had brought him up higher and higher. And he is, the Medrash says, and he is the one that the pasuk is referring to when it says going up on the ladder. And Korach, with all of his money, ended up Nebuch in a ditch with his 250 people and with his billions of dollars, that it couldn't save him. And the word sulam, the pasuk says, V'hine sulam mutzav arza, v'rosho magia hashamoima, that the word sulam is begematria 136, which is the gematria of tshuva, and then tzedakah and tefillah, that because on top of those three words, when we call it out on Rosh Hashanah, that it says Tzom, Mammon, and Kol. And those three words, which are a reference to the Tshuva, Tzedakah, and Tefillah, that they each are Begematria 136, which is Begematria this word Sulam. Now, our parsha begins that Yaakov Avinu went to sleep. When he woke up in the morning and headed to Luz, he made a matzeva. And we're going to talk Parshas Vayishlach more about matzeva, because the concept of matzeva and everything there in Parshas Vayishlach talk more about what this accomplishes. As a matter of fact, for us, that when we put up a matzeva after someone is nifter, so the Mekubolim all said that the neshama does not have shleimus of menucha till the matzeva is put up. And that's the reason by Satmar, by Lubavitch, by Vizhnitz, they go immediately after Shiva and they put up the matzeva. They bedafka do it the day after. Lubavitch, even from walking around the house after the Shiva is concluded and we escort the neshama to its menucha, from that moment they get into cars and they go straight out to the cemetery for Hakomas Matzeva. Satmar and Visions does it the day after, one day later. But the idea is to give that menucha to the neshama. The matzeva is very important. But those in Yonim will discuss more Parshas Vayishlach next week. But interestingly, the Ramban says that Yaakov Avinu did not, we assume from the Psukim that he got up from his sleep and his dream and he put the matzeva up. That's what you would assume from what the Psukim say, but the Ramban comes and says no. He picked up the stone and he carried it to Luz, and there he made the matzeva. So the Meforshim ask on the Ramban, why did he have to do that? He says a pirush, which is Kodesh Kadoshim, that he carried the stone. There are other stones in Luz. He could have found a stone. He didn't have to carry such a heavy thing and bring it. So the Meforshim say a very interesting message for all of us. When you become inspired, imbued, and uplifted by something that happened, that moment, you have to carry that inspiration on to capture the moment. And if Yaakov Avinu wouldn't have carried the matzeva, then by the time he would have gotten to Luz, it wouldn't have been the priority. I mean, there was no tzivui from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he had to put up the matzeva. He did this because he felt that this was something that had to be done. So he understood that it should not weather any storm of the Yetzer Hara to take away that lofty level of where he was at that moment. He had to carry the stone with him. That ensured that instilled the power of the inspiration to be carried, and that when he got to Luz, it was the first thing that he did. And we have to know that we are given golden opportunities, tzedakah, chesed, to learn a geschmack, with geschmack, a mishnah or a daf gemara, or to do hachnasas orchim, or to take a siddur and to be able to envelop ourselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the davening, we shouldn't be busy with the cell phone or thinking about what we're going to do after davening. That 80% of our mind is in that, and it's not in the davening. We have to seize the moment of opportunity. Now, I want to say to you that you know that except for Binyamin, every one of the children, and Yaakov Avinu had the 12 tribes minus Binyamin, 11 in this parsha. He had Dinah, and with each one there was a twin born that they married. That was their wives, because before Matan Torah, this was not considered aroyos. This was a higher level, and that's why we read Yom Kippur Mincha, which is higher. Myriad is only nefesh, and Shachris is ruach, and Musaf is neshama, and Mincha Yom Kippur is chaye. And then Yechida by Ne'ilah, which only reveals itself once a year by Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur. So we're going up. So why do we lane on Yom Kippur Mincha all about our royos? That's the last thing that we would think we would want in such a Kedusha, higher and higher and higher. To talk about this is incest and this is incest. That's the Kriyas HaTorah Tzugepast for Yom Kippur. And the answer is yeah, because in Shoirish, before it, as a matter of fact, when Mashiach will come, we'll come back to the level of not only Tchiyas HaMesim, but to Olam Haba, then these things will be mutter. That in Shoirish, and you see that's why the Shiftei Kah, that were kulam ahuvim, kulam giborim, kulam berurim, that they were at the highest level, that they married their sisters. Because in Shoirish it was higher. Coming down to earth after Chatoim and everything, then it became absolutely forbidden at the highest level. But anyway, what I want to say to you is that probably the hardest pasuk to translate in this Sedra is the pasuk when Naphtali was born. Naphtali's mother was Bilhah. We remember that Rachel saw she didn't have children, and she therefore took her maidservant Bilhah and she told it to Yaakov Avinu, and with Bilhah she had two sons, Dan and Naphtali. Now, the word Dan, we understand, means judgment, that there was a judgment of could she give birth, not give birth, that's done. But what is Naphtali? And Rashi has a hard time with how to translate it, and I am going to read to you, because if you take a look, even let's say Art Scroll, how do they translate Naphtali? Naphtali Elokim Niftalti. And after I'm going to read you the Rashi, you'll see that Rashi concurs with the opinion expressed in Medrash that it means sacred schemes. A scheme means like shtick, like doing something, and that's the way Rashi says it. Naphtali Elokim, Menachem ben Sirok, Pirsho b'machberes Samid Posel. And Va'ani mefarsho loshen ikesh ufasalto, sacred schemes, like a dray, that over here there was a cheshbon that how many there would be and why she wasn't giving birth. And Gam Yacholti means Hiskim al Yodi, that I was maskim to it. It's a very hard understanding, and as a matter of fact, the Malbim says on those words, Summit Puzzle, because that's by Tumah, if there's a covering to the pot, then there's different halachas if the covering was completely over the top, whether the inside of that pot became tamei. So, and if you hold that Naftali means Summit Puzzle, that means Kisui v'choisem, that it is completely covered. And that's how the Meforshim really end up. Like Menachem ben Srok, Summit Puzzle, that Rachel said, I have a big question. How could it be that I was ready to give up my life and let my sister marry Yaakov? Because it says that Rachel thought at that moment, that's it, she'll never get married. No, she's giving up her life for her sister Leah, not to be embarrassed. So Rachel thought, is this tzaddik viralo? Leah didn't do anything. I'm the one that put myself in an unbelievable position, and I'm not having children. That's my thank you. That's my schar from doing what I did, and she's having all the children. But Samid Pasel, which means kisui, the chibur, the top is Samid, is completely closed. That Rachel made a cheshbon. What am I beginning to think? The Rabbanu Shalom runs the world, and you can't ask questions. And the Mesilas Yesharim on this has a whole page in Mesilas Yesharim. You know, the Mesilas Yesharim was the Ramchal, Reb Moshe Chaim Litzato, who was the Gilgul, the Mekubalim all say, of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, the first 39 years of his life, did not learn, and it was the Ramchal who came back as Rabbi Akiva and lived 39 years to the day of when Rabbi Akiva began learning. To the day, the Mekubalim all say. To be misakin those first 39 years that he lived. And that's why if you go to Tveria, you'll see Rabbi Akiva on top of the mountain, and right next to him is the Ramchal. He's the only person buried next to Rabbi Akiva. Say the Mekubalim, because that was the same neshama. It was Rabbi Akiva. He came back to fix up and to fill in the first 39 years. So the Meforshim also, and the Malbim says, and the Ramchal, that Rachel came Tzamid Pasil, that's the taich of Naphtali, that I have no kashas, and Gam Yacholti, I accept everything, that this is a cheshbon of the Rabbanu Shalom, and that's how I am leaving it. And that, if you look at Rashi, it's like a 10-line Rashi, how he teaches Naftuli Elokim Niftalti. And that's the teich of the name Naftali. Either like I said in the beginning, sacred schemes, or it means intertwined crookedness. And that's how we teach that thing. Why is it crooked? Because when you start to think about cheshbonos and considerations, why this, why that, what's going on, and that's crooked for this world. To go straight is to have the emunah and the bitachon that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world. And the Mesilas Yesharim then goes off for a half a page that to make tikkunim in this world, that means everything that happens, especially in this door. We're not talking about Rabbi Akiva who lived 2,000 years ago, But we're talking about today that almost every neshama is a Gilgul. And every neshama is here to be misaken. It could be the person never had kavanah for 80 years in any bracha. He would take something to drink and make the bracha, and he never thought about what the words mean. He was busy dreaming about where he has to go and what he has to take. And for 80 years he was making brachas and he never had kavanah. And he's back here to be misaken that. And there's 1,000 examples, which of course we will not go into, but the Mesilas Yesharim said that Rachel concluded that all of this is happening to her because she has to be misaken something. Don't forget, Rachel only lived 36 years. She was 36 years old when she was nifter. Leah was 45. But that's youngsters. You would have imagined she lived to 100. No. That she was misaken, whatever they had to do, and we find that when Yaakov Avinu, right before he was nifter, he was talking to Yosef, his son, and he said to his son, that Rashi brings it in some medrash, in Vayetzei. He said to Yosef, I know that you're angry with me, because I buried your mother al haderech by Bais Lochem, and that Leah was buried in Maras HaMachpelah. Now I once told you that Leah was a bechina of Bina, and Rachel was Malchus. Malchus is where everything flows through down to Olam Hazeh, all the brachas, all the shefa. So Yaakov Avinu held that, what do I have to marry first Leah? And that's Bina, higher. It all ends up by Rachel, by Malchus, so I could just marry her first. But it was a wrong cheshbon. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed Lavan to trick him, and he ended up, in our parsha, that Vayehi Baboker was the morning, Vehinehi Leah. That he only saw that it was Leah in the morning. He didn't know that he was intimate and he was with Rachel, with Leah. But this was all tikkunim to be able to bring about what had to be done. And Yaakov Avinu said it to Yosef, that it was a cheshbon from the Rabbanu Shloim, that she has to stand up and comfort Klal Yisrael when they're going out into Golus, like the pasuk says, Rachel mevaka al boneha. She stood up from her grave as Klal Yisrael was being sent out of Eretz Yisrael to Golus, and she ran over to them and said, you will see that you're going to come back. And she was Mephias. She gave tanchumim. She consoled. She comforted the people. That's why she had to be al adorach. Don't think, Yosef, Yaakov said to him, that I did it out of chas v'sholom laxity, or I didn't want to have to go the whole way to Hebron. But there was a cheshbon lamala that she had to be buried right over there. Now, in our Sedra, we find that Reuven went out. It says, Vayehi bimei ketzir hachitim. It was the wheat harvest. The harvest. They were harvesting the wheat. And he found loosely in the field mandrake, dudoim. Mandrake is some type of a flower. And Rashi says, Malamed shvacho shel shivton, that this tells us the shvach, the praise, that he took only from the hefker. He didn't take any ones, because there could have been other things left that the owner of the field would come back and gather. But these were hefker, and it was not geneva. So the Meforshim are aghast. What is being said here? What? this is the shvach of shvotim, that they didn't steal. These were kodesh kadoshim, that after they sold Yosef, they had to be killed, because the halacha is that if you kidnap someone and you sell the person, there's a death penalty. And that's why the Asar Aruge Malchus 1800 years later got killed. And each one was a neshama of the Shvatim. A tikkun for the fact that they sold Yosef and they took the 20 silver coins and they bought shoes with it. Now, had they only kidnapped him but not sold him, the halacha is it's a lav. You get malchus, but you're not put to death. But if you kidnap someone and you sell the person and you gain all of this money, so then there's a death penalty. And that's why the Zohar Kodesh asks, so why didn't just the Shvatim be killed? And the answer, and say there was no malach, there was no soraf, there was no chayus hakodesh, and there were no ofanim. Not any level of a malach in Shamayim that could execute the Shivtei Kor. They were so big that if any of them came over to do something to them, they would have been destroyed on the spot. Destroyed on the spot. So they had to come down to the Shivtei Kor, to the Asar Aruge Malchus, to the Tanoim. And since they didn't have a minyan, they were Mitzaref HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why Rabbi Akiva, who was Minishmas Gerim, why should he be killed? He wasn't one of the Shvatim. He came out of the gate because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the 10th. They needed a minyan, and they were Mitzaref HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Kaviyachol needed a kapara also, and that's why Rabbi Akiva, Yatzason Nishmaso Be'echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad Keneged Echad Yochid Umiyuchad. He was a kapara for him. But Reb Elazar, Reb Hyrcanus, who was a neshama from Ruvain was home with Kibbud Av. He was free of the whole thing. He walked the streets. The Romans never touched him, never grabbed him to kill him like they wanted to kill all the others. So coming back to our Reuven, who took these mandarins and he brought them home to his mother Leah. And Rachel saw her with the mandarins, with these dudoim, and she said to her, could I have the flowers? And she answered her and she said, not only do you want to take my husband, but you want to take my flowers also? So the Mefarshim say that that's why Rachel Imenu was Zoicha to Malchus, to be mashpia all the shefa in Olam Hazeh, because she didn't answer her. She had a ton that she could have said, what? I took your husband? I was ready to give up my life that you should have Yaakov Avinu and you shouldn't be humiliated. And I gave the simonim, we had all the simonim from Yaakov, and I was under the bed doing the talking so he shouldn't suspect that there was any tricking here. And I was ready to give up my entire life, and you're saying I took your husband? But she never answered. So there was an unbelievable schar, and we know that there were many stories of people who didn't have children, and Tzaddikim told them that if ever you see someone being embarrassed publicly and the person doesn't answer, run over to that person and ask them immediately for a bracha. And there were 10 stories with Reb Chaim Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodosh Levrocha, who used to finish Shas and Rambam and Bavli Yerushalmi every year. He used to tell them that Eitzah. If he saw Baruch Kodsho that this woman is designated for a life of no children, he would tell her, that's the only eitzah I can give you. And many of them, and there's a book that has these stories in it, they ran over. There was a bar mitzvah one time, and the woman, the almana, was yelling at a couple that thought they were buying the apartment next door in Bnei Brak, and she, in front of the entire mesiba, the bar mitzvah suda, started to scream at her, and the woman that needed children, and she was without children 22 years, ran over and said, please don't answer her. And as soon as she didn't answer and the woman stopped the screaming, she said, now give me a bracha, I should have a child. And that year she gave birth, and I know people that knew all the actors, all the characters in this story. And yes, she indeed had a baby boy. So, but to muster the strength not to answer, if you're standing in front of 50 people and someone's yelling at you, you have the biggest desire to, oh, this and that? What about what you did? And what about this? And what about, you have such a tshuka, a desire to come back. You're being embarrassed in front of 50 people. But if you could hold yourself back, it will make a very big difference. You can give out a bracha to someone for parnasa, for children that desperately needs it. But you have to muster the courage and the backbone and the strength not to answer. Now, it says that Reuven, when this story took place, was 3 years old. 3 years old. The Medrash brings that to the year starting with Bereshis Bara, year 1, there was 2,193 years, and that's the year that Reuven was born. And this little boy was doing all of these things, all for kibbud aim, and put himself into a terrible position of sakana because of what he did. And there was a kapeda, and even 9 years later, by Mechiras Yosef, Reuven was still going back home to do tshuva. If you look in Rashi, you will see that when the brothers were out there in the field, and they grabbed Yosef and threw him into the pit, and then they pulled him out, and everything that happened with Yosef, it was 9 years later, and the Chazal say that Reuven was still doing tshuva. He was going back home, according to one opinion in Rashi, for kibbud av, to have his day of taking care of his father, Yaakov. Another opinion is that he was going back home, besako uvetaniso, his sackcloth that he sat in as he continuously did tshuva, because he took the bed of his mother and put it into Yaakov's tent, which there was a taina to him. There was a taina that he, even though he meant it for the covet of his mother and everything, we have to do very carefully what we do to make sure that it's ois gehalten in Shamayim, that it complies with the will of what Shamayim wants. Now, the Shaloah HaKadosh says a very interesting thing, that at the end of the Sedra, we find that Yaakov Avinu had a dream. He was there already 20 years by Lavan, who tricked him and cheated him and changed their contract. It says Aseres Moinim 10 times. But the Chazal say it was not 10 times. It was 10 times 10. It was 100 times. And he was constantly being cheated and drayed and everything. So the Pasuk says that Yaakov Avinu in his sleep, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him and told him, it's time for you to go back home to Eretz Yisrael, return. And the psukim afterwards, for 6 or 7 psukim, describe how he came to his wives, and he said, you know that I worked for your father Erlich. I didn't sleep at night. I watched that not one of the sheep would be killed or stolen by the wild animals. And he goes through a whole litany of what he lived through in the 20 years. And at the end, and he then said, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu came and told me I should leave. Now, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to any of you, and you knew it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming to you, and in the dream told you, you leave immediately and go here or there, would you wake up and then go to your wives and start a whole story? You know what your father did to me, and you know how honest I was with him, and last night HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me, leave. Most of us would have gotten up in the morning, jumped out of the bed, washed Negelwasser first, then jumped out of the bed. And it's important to wash Negelwasser because the Zohar HaKadosh in Parshas Miketz says that somebody that gets out of bed in the morning and the tumah is still on his hands, and lahalacha, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to go to a sink, you're allowed to walk, whatever, because your whole house is Daled Amas. But the Zohar HaKadosh says, but if somebody gets up and takes a step with the tumah on his hands, it's impossible for him to have hatzlacha that day. The Zohar HaKadosh. So we would jump out, we would wash Negava and jump out of bed, and we would say to our wives, Hashem came to me and told me we got to go, let's go pack up, and we're running. Why did Yaakov Avinu take these 7 psukim to discuss with them and to paint the picture of what he lived through? Says the Shaloah HaKadosh that the reason is because in this world we have to treat people with hanhaga, with a conduct of what's proper in him. You can't just tell somebody, I'm telling you to do this and that, and do it now. There's a way to speak to people. This Shlomo Kodesh says that he wanted his wives to understand and to be maskim, and they answered him. We have nothing from our father. He cheated us too. We know what he was doing. So the Shlomo Kodesh says this teaches us that when people deal with their wives, or a wife deals with a husband, you don't just come in, even if it's as clear as crystal that it has to be done, but there's a way and a method and a power of either persuasion or courtesy to be able to deal with another human being. We don't order people. We don't boss around people. There's a way to have edele discussion and edele presentation that it should have all of the characteristics of refinedness and proper hanhaga in how we conduct ourselves in those moments. Now, it says that after Leah gave birth, Vatamod Miledes, after she gave her fourth son, she didn't have at that point any more children. Of course, the Meforshim, and she said she named him Yehuda, because Apam Oides Hashem, I want to thank Hashem. And the Medrash says that Leah was the first person to give thanks. What do you mean Leah was the first person to give thanks? Noach got off of the Teva, he built a Mizbeach as a thanks to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. We can give you 10 examples. By Avram Avinu, thanks and korbanos and everything that they did. So why does the Medrash say that this was the first that someone gave a thank you to our Kodesh Baruch Hu? And the Meforshim explain and answer that, of course, others before her gave thanks, but no one do we find before her ever gave thanks on extra. In other words, she made a cheshbon that there's 4 wives, and every one of them should have 3. There's going to be Yud Beis Shvatim, 12. So each one should have 3 children, and that adds up to 12. Now she had a 4th. Yehuda was her 4th. So that was extra. So she thanked Hashem on the extra. That was unbelievable that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave her such a rare and remarkable gift. But other Meforshim say that on the Vatamod Miledes, that a person when he gets bracha, and the Meforshim all talk about this, he's not allowed to say, thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have enough, or I understand I'm not entitled to anymore. He should continue davening for more. Don't play the Rabbanu Shalom. He has his cheshbonis, how much you should have. A guy made $1 million on something. Oy, Rabbanu Shalom, wow, I have so much money, I don't have to borrow, I don't have to beg, I got the $1 million. Give the bracha to somebody else now. You're not allowed to say that. Because there's cheshbonis of what you have to have, and it only comes through tefillah. They all say this. As a matter of fact, the Shalot talks about it also. We just spoke about the Shalot HaKadosh. That when a person gets bracha, you don't know what's destined for you, what you're supposed to have, what you're supposed to do. You're just supposed to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu and continue to daven for more bracha. Bracha. You're not saying to take away from someone else. You're not saying you're denying someone else the opportunity. You're asking, and tefillah is the most powerful antidote that we see that a person could have and could lift himself up into the realm of bracha, and that bracha means every single thing that comes his way. And that's why they taich Vatamod Miledes. I mean, why does the pasuk have to say that? First of all, later she did have more children. Secondly, it's a message to us that she ended up pushing off having any more bracha at that point from having children because she never asked for more. Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I hope I'll be zoicha to more shefa and to more bracha. That's what she should have said. Now, there is in our Seder, Yaakov Avinu went off to the yeshiva of Shem v'Ever. We know that Shem was the son of Noach, and in his lifetime, the story of the Mabel took place. He lived through the Mabel. Aver lived through the Dor HaFloga, when they built the tower they thought they were so, it was only when they discovered how to take mud and to make it into bricks, the Medrash says. When they thought they were the biggest chachomim, and that they could even take on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they could fight him. So the question is this: Yaakov Avinu was busy learning Torah the whole time. So why did he leave? To go to Shem v'Ever, to learn Torah. That means his mission was to go find the shidduch, to go to Lavan, and to the family, his family, and to see what's doing and marry. Why did he stop for 14 years? He could have just stayed home. It says, Yoshev Oholim. He was sitting and learning Torah. So what do they need Shem v'Ever? So the answer the Meforshim say is because Shem lived through the Mabel and Aver lived through the Dor HaFloga, they ran a yeshiva that learned fervently Torah. But it was Torah of how to survive in Golus. That means sitting by Yitzchak Avinu in a tent in his room and learning Torah and coming out to Yitzchak Avinu, the Oila Tamima, who never stepped out of Eretz Yisrael. That's like being in the Kodesh Kadoshim the whole time. But now he was on his way to Lavan. How was he going to survive the nisyonis of being by his uncle that was full of trickery, deceit, and cheating, and not cave in even 1 inch, go past that line of demarcation? And that's what he learned in Shem v'Ever. He couldn't learn it in his father's house. His father was never in such a realm his whole life. Avram Avinu and Yaakov Avinu stepped out of Eretz Yisrael, but not Yitzchak. Not Yitzchak. As I've said to you on many occasions, and that's our raya, that we have Avira, the heir of Eretz Yisrael, in our sukkahs, because we invite Yitzchak Avinu in as one of the Ushpizin to our sukkah. And if he's not allowed to go out of Eretz Yisrael, how does he enter into every Yiddish sukkah on sukkahs as one of the Ushpizin? But the proof is that in the atmosphere, the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is sprinkled into the sukkah so that Yitzchak Avinu is not leaving Avira Eretz Yisrael. So Yaakov Avinu had to go to a place like Shem v'Ever to be able to bring out and to be able to have the strongest push for success. And as Yaakov Avinu said to Rachel, because she said, you know, you're coming to my house, my father is not the most honest man. He said, take it easy. I could meet him toe to toe on all of the things. I learned in a yeshiva that they prepared us for what gullus is and what trickery is and cheating is while we were learning Torah. but they brought out the Chazal and they brought out the Inyonim of how a person could escape falling in with all of these problems. Now, we find that in the 20 years that Yaakov Avinu was with Lavan, he never got angry with him. That means he was all along the way twisting, turning, cheating, lying, and he never told him off. But when Yaakov Avinu left and Lavan came running after him, when Yaakov Avinu started to talk, he let him have it over the head. Why over here? He lived for 20 years that he took it. And he never complained and he never told him off. Why over here? So the Meforshim say because when Lavan was busy cheating Yaakov Avinu, it was purely from Yaakov Avinu. It was one-on-one. It was personal, Lavan to Yaakov. But when he came and he screamed at him in front of everyone, Lama ganavta es Elohoi, why did you steal and take my God? That means he had an avodah zarah. Yaakov Avinu, as we know, didn't know. And when Yaakov Avinu got angry and he said, why are you accusing me of stealing your avodah zarah? Whoever it is, if someone did that, they should die. And that's one of the reasons that Rachel Imenu died, because Yaakov Avinu didn't know that she took the idol and was hiding it to get the avodah zarah. And the Kabbalah Sforim say that that thing had such magic in it. It was telling her, this idol was telling off the people. And Kisrei Ari, he talks about what this idol was and the magic that it possessed and everything. It wasn't just like a little doll or something that was sitting there. And it had tremendous power. But the fact that she was sitting on it, it subdued, that it couldn't talk and it couldn't... so there's a lot to it. But why did Yaakov Avinu suddenly burst out in anger and start telling off Lavan? And the answer the Meforshim say is because he publicly challenged him and there was a question of Chilul Hashem. Oh, this is the guy that was sitting with the Gemara the whole night while he was watching the sheep. He's Mr. Clean? He's Mr. Good? He's a Ganav. His father-in-law just said it publicly. So Yaakov Avinu could not allow this to come about. For himself, he suffered the whole 20 years and he never said a word. But now that it was a question, and this teaches us that there are times we're not allowed to be quiet. In other words, I was just speaking to you, let the person yell at you and suffer, you'll be able to become a Rebbe and give brachas out. But there is a time that if the yelling is causing a real major Chilul Hashem, that you're not allowed to do it. There's a time you have to take on for Kavod Shemayim. Yaakov Avinu was the paradigm, was the pinnacle, was the turret, the example par excellence of Kedusha, Tahara, Torah, Achibur HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Bechir Shebavos. Avram Avinu didn't have the Yud Beis Shvatim, and neither did Yitzchak. But Yaakov Avinu did. And that's why he's called the Bechir Shebavos. He was higher than any of the others, Yaakov Avinu. So when it came a point that, that in front of the grandchildren, and they don't know all of my schusim and my, and Zayda is yelling at me like this, Ganef, Ganef, Ganef. Now I have to answer. I can't allow a Chilul Hashem to take place over here in front of all of them. The Rabbanu Shalom should help us that we should be able to be Makadesh Shem Shamayim Barabim, and that we should, in the schus of Yaakov Avinu, who is the backbone of Golus, to be able to survive Klal Yisrael through the Golus, that we be able to bring ourselves up into the realm of luster and sunshine for the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.